Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is John Horn. Hi, John.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. Well, it's great to have you on this podcast. So thank you for being a guest here. We're going to have a very interesting conversation today about systematizing some of the marketing for different companies. And you're going to walk us step by step on how to do that. We're going to have a conversation about that. But first, I'm going to start with your bio. So you are the CEO of StubGroup, a top 1% premier Google partner agency that helps established business owners achieve protected return on investment from paid advertising. So I'm going to ask you about that, like protected return on investment. Okay, well, definitely have questions on that. And you generated over 400 million in client revenue. You stand out by acting as an ad compliance lawyer. So we have to be compliant with those ads, right? Prioritizing protection and policy compliance to eliminate the suspension risk and destroy businesses. So John, welcome to this podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, let's start with, okay, so what are some of the compliance issues that exist in this area that our listeners might not be aware of?
So Google, obviously, they have a very massive ecosystem, and they are always trying to protect that ecosystem. They're trying to protect you when you are using Google to look for things. And when you click on an ad, Google wants to make sure that everything is going to be good after you click on that ad. There's not going to be malware on the website. You're not going to be sold things that aren't true. There's not going to be, false claims, things like that. And so Google, thankfully, has a very massive, team, automations, et cetera, built around keeping people safe when they're clicking on Google ads and enforcing all sorts of different policies that Google has around what you can and can't advertise. And that's a really good thing. But unfortunately, because of the scale at which Google operates, there are all kinds of normal advertisers who aren't trying to do anything wrong, who accidentally get caught up. Sometimes it's a false flag. They didn't do anything wrong, and the system just flagged them incorrectly. Or sometimes they did something wrong, but by wrong, I don't mean malicious. It might mean, they didn't have the right policy pages on their website, or they didn't realize they couldn't have a redirect in their ads, or things like this. And so what we do is we come alongside of advertisers who get caught up in these flags and who are trying to do the right thing. And we try and help them figure out what went wrong and how to fix their issues so that Google will let them back onto Google's platform, because Google is really bad about telling you exactly what you did wrong and telling you how to fix it. They just give you very generic information. And then for a lot of businesses, they just start hitting their head against a brick wall because they don't know how to actually get their ads back online. And so I've kind of built up a practice over the last decade of helping advertisers with this.
So basically, when somebody already encountered a problem, they can come to you and you fix it for them or get them back. So how do you do that? How do you figure out like what went wrong? And if Google doesn't really tell you, what are the actions that you take?
A lot of it comes from a decade of experience of really trial and error and figuring things out. So first of all, obviously, we intimately understand what Google's policies are and what they're looking for and what they're not looking for. And then we've worked with so many people, both fixing issues as well as proactively preventing issues over the years, that we've built up a lot of information to understand, okay, well, this is a common problem. If you don't have this on your website, or if you are saying this in your ads, or whatever the case may be, we know there's a good chance this is a problem for Google. And so we help our clients fix issues on their website, or sometimes we just help them craft an appeal in a way that Google wants to see. So we might say, okay, we need to explain exactly what we think the problem was, what actions we took to correct it, what actions we're going to take in the future to make sure it doesn't happen again, as well as maybe here's documentation showing we're legitimate as a business and things like that. And really kind of crafting it all, packaging it up in such a way that Google can understand, okay, these guys, they are legit. They're trying to do the right thing, and we're going to give them another chance on our platform.
Okay. Now, are there any ways to prevent it ahead of time? Like if they start working with you, what are some of the actions that people can do in order to prevent from that happening?
Yeah, there's a lot you can do proactively. There's never any guarantee. At the end of the day, Google is Google and they'll make the decisions they want to make. So we're always very careful to say we can't guarantee you won't have a problem because we're not Google. We can't control it. But there are a lot of things you can do proactively to reduce the risk of having issues. For example, on your website, there are a lot of things on your website that can go wrong, that can cause Google to suspend you. So, for example, let's say you're an e-commerce advertiser. Well, there's a lot of very specific policy pages you need to have on your website, like your shipping policy, your refund and return policy, the ability for people to track their order with you after they place the order. And you need to have very specific information on those pages that also matches up with what you're telling Google about those same policies in your ad account, in your what they call Google Merchant Center. So consistency is really important. Having the right information on your website is really important. Staying on top of like ad level disapprovals in your ad account. So Google might not suspend your entire ad account, but they might say there's a problem with this ad over here or this aspect. And if you don't attend to that and don't go fix the problem, maybe you have a broken link or something else is going on, those things can kind of snowball and create additional problems that might impact your account. So staying on top of that's important. And then just being really aware of what you're saying in your ads, of the claims you're making on your website. Another great example would be like if you're in the health space, for example, you have to be very, very careful with having the appropriate disclaimers. If you have before and after photos, let's say you're in the weight loss space, for example, well, you need to have disclaimers. Individual results may vary. You have to have disclaimers about, hey, these results are endorsed by the FDA, different things like that. Every type of business has some different nuances you have to be aware of. But at the end of the day, it comes down to trying to be as transparent as possible with your potential customers who are on your website, and therefore by extension Google, and making sure everything is consistent and comprehensive as possible, in proving that you're trying to do things the right way and you are a legitimate company with a legitimate product or service that you're offering to your customers.
Okay, so how do you stay on top of everything? How do you stay on top of the latest rules, regulations, and also how do you know that when regulations are no longer in place so you don't overdo it?
Yeah, a variety of ways. We're kind of uniquely placed because we do so much work in this space that we are able to see how Google is enforcing things in real time. Because a big part of this space as well is, Google, they have broad policies, and of course we're intimately familiar with them. We're always watching if Google changes those policies. We know right away, okay, they updated the policy. But
how do you know that? Because they
in this
publish
world
it, or
really
because you are a partner? Like, how would you know that they actually changed the policy?
Yeah, so their policies are they're public online for anyone to read, and whenever they change them, they'll say, "Hey, here's a change." So everyone has access to see what those policies are and kind of the change history of what those policies are. But the problem is that Google these are very broad policies, and how Google enforces them is not always consistent, and that changes over time. And so that's where a lot of just the trial and error and expertise comes into play, where we see, oh, you know what? Okay, Google is starting to enforce this policy this way because we have a lot of this type of business reaching out to us saying, hey, we've been running for years, no issue. Now we're flagged. What's going on? And we're able to say, okay, well, so we see this going on. Oh, you know what? This approach fixed this over here for this business. We can apply the same approach to these other businesses who are having this issue. And so really apply that in the trenches understanding of how Google's actually operating to help all the clients that we're working with.
Okay, so you definitely need to stay on top of it. What would you recommend to small businesses when they're looking at actually using ads? What would be some best practices? I mean, I understand about the compliance, but I'm just talking now in general.
Yeah. So let's talk some high level kind of best practices. I'd say that the first thing, if you're a business and let's say you're getting into Google ads, let's say for the first time, it's really important to think through, what does success look look like for me from these Google ads I want to run? And B, how am I going to track it? Because often businesses will say, okay, let's throw some money at Google ads and see what happens. But they don't have any mechanism in place to actually understand what happens from those ads. They're not able to track and say, okay, how many phone calls do we get people to click their ads, or orders through our website, or whatever the case may be, whatever they're trying to drive. And so it's really important to sit down before you start running those ads and say, here's how I'm going to track what happens when people click the ads. And here's what I'm looking for. Here's, if we can get X number of leads, this is successful because this can be profitable. Or if we don't get X number of leads, this isn't going to work for us. And so kind of starting with a plan in mind is really important when you start running ads. And then the second thing I would say is you have to be really careful about what Google calls, or really what any ad platform calls, their best practices. So most of the ad platforms, they make it really easy for you to run your own ads. They have DIY ad platforms. I could go in right now and start a campaign with a couple clicks of a button. But what happens is you're often opted into all sorts of things that Google says, hey, in general, this is the best practice. In general, you have these placements enabled for your campaigns. You should have broad match keywords, or whatever the case may be. And those might be best practices for some businesses, but they're not necessarily the best practice for your business. And a lot of businesses just kind of trust, oh, Google, it's Google, so they're telling me the right thing to do. They say, do this, I'll keep this box check marked, or whatever the case may be. But really, if you have someone on your team who has some experience with Google ads, you work with someone like StubGroup or whatever, someone who kind of knows how to apply those best practices to your business, you can save a lot of wasted ad spend and wasted time when you get started.
Absolutely. Just like anything else, you have to talk to an expert in order to know how to do that. That's for sure. Yeah. And it's not, I mean, you can do some of it yourself, but it's not necessarily a do it yourself. I will ask, I'm sure you get it, right? I'll ask AI how to do it, and AI will guide me. So is that a good practice? I mean, have you found success with that, or what are the liabilities of doing it that way?
Yeah, so AI is great and dangerous. What we've found, we use AI a lot ourselves, even helping us manage campaigns for clients, is there are areas in which it can be very valuable. Doing data analysis, a bunch of data, crunching numbers, things like that. Although you have to be careful, because sometimes it hallucinates numbers, so you gotta still validate. But you also, again, this is where the nuance comes in. Like AI, a lot of those recommendations that I give you are kind of based upon the best practices you see on the internet. And sometimes those best practices might be old, or they might not be relevant to your business. And so you want to pair the AI and the analysis and the scalability of that with someone who really understands what's unique about your business, about your offering, what separates you from the competition, what your sales cycle looks like, and is able to bring those nuances into bear, because that's really where the magic is, so to speak. That's the difference between an average or an underperforming campaign and a campaign that's extremely profitable, is marrying that unique understanding of your market, your business, with how the platforms work and general best practices there.
Yeah. How good are you at analyzing or forecasting at the beginning of the campaign how the campaign is going to perform?
Great question. It's tough to forecast, because especially if you're working with, or if we're working with a relatively new business to advertising and they don't have benchmark data, there's a lot of unknowns. There's unknowns, there's some general benchmarks we have of, okay, we'd like to see X conversion rate, X click-through rate, things like that. But every market, both geographically, behaviorally, et cetera, is different. Every business has a little bit of a unique take on things compared to the competitors, compared to what the other options are. And so really, we try to be very careful with setting realistic expectations when we start working with businesses, but saying, hey, we can't guarantee you these numbers. We don't know what's going to happen until we actually start running. We see how people react with your ads, with your website, with your sales team, what your close rates look like on this business we're generating for you. And so really, those initial months, generally first couple of months of a business starting ads for the first time, is trying to identify what some of those benchmarks are and see which parts of their marketing is working the best, where are they seeing good response, which parts aren't, and then pivoting and iterating towards those things.
Yeah, so you definitely have to have a system. We are all about processes and procedures and documenting processes and workflows and systematizing a business. So the founder owner doesn't have to be stuck in a business, but also for everyone to empower the everyone in the business so they know what they're doing. Because really, you can't run a business without a playbook, without knowing how things are being run. I mean, it's kind of like training is such a component of running any business. Just like you have training, you are training your clients on, okay, this is compliance, this is what you need to do. We got to have training with everything. So from your perspective, how important are processes and why processes are important for a business from a marketing standpoint?
Extremely important. I'll pick one example. So let's say that you're using marketing to drive leads to your sales team. You could be whatever, a local services business, B2B SaaS, whatever, any situation where you're getting these leads. Well, if you don't have a system in place for how you're handling those leads, if sometimes, Johnny over here, he picks up the phone, talks to the person. Sometimes, you don't get back to this lead that came in for a week or whatever the case may be. Well, you're never going to really have consistent results from your marketing because you're not consistently handling how those leads come in. And so you might go to your marketing team and be like, okay, well, how come last month was great and this month is terrible, or whatever the case may be? And the answer is maybe you're getting the same types of leads, maybe not. Maybe there's something different with the marketing, maybe not. But if you're not systematically handling those leads in the same way, using similar nurture flows, getting back to them in a similar amount of time, making sure you are getting back to them, etc., then your performance is always going to be all over the place, no matter what you do with your marketing. And that same idea applies to really every aspect of business, is systematizing, getting processes in place so that it's consistent. And then you can identify where the bottlenecks are, what's not working well, laser in on those things, improve, and then constantly be improving the performance coming from those systems over time.
Exactly right. I agree. So it all combines together. And then if they have your help and you help them be compliant and make sure that there is continuity and consistency also in the ads, because you're not being shut down, that's definitely a very helpful thing as well. John, thank you very much for this conversation. It's full of data that our listeners can apply and use. And if they would like to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
Best place is through our website, stubgroup.com. And then I'd also say, if you want a bunch of free information about how to not get suspended and have policy issues and whatnot, we put a lot of videos on our channel. Just search on our YouTube channel. Just search StubGroup on YouTube.
Fantastic. And we'll include this in the show notes, all those, the address for your website and your YouTube channel, all the resources. Excellent. Well, John, thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.